Welcome back to Talking Europe. For the past 6 months, our next guest has been Prime Minister of a country in conflict. Some 10,000 people have been killed and fighting continues in Ukraine. A recent summit to try and breathe life into the peace deal, dubbed Minsk II, was said to have laid out the roadmap, but all sides admit that it will not be an easy ride. To bring us the very latest on all going on in his country, we're joined by Volodymyr Groysman. A very warm welcome to the show, Mr. Groysman. Your appointment to office came after the resignation of RC Yatsenuk. He left office accused of not fighting corruption and not really doing enough to stimulate economic reforms. You've taken over the job 6 months ago. What's changed?
I can't say these have been the best 6 months of my life. As far as we're concerned, there are a lot of challenges ahead of us, and what we have to do first and foremost is to stabilize the situation. For instance, we have rekindled economic growth, and we see a very positive outlook for the economy in 2017. And I came to France specifically in order to show that we need to strengthen our economic cooperation. And, for instance, we have also enhanced all of the different mechanisms to fight against corruption. We've gone into more decentralization.
As you say, a lot to concentrate on to try and deal with that. Let's pick through it bit by bit. You mentioned corruption, and I believe the end of October was this deadline for filling in the financial assets online of all Ukrainian politicians and officials. A lot of people complained that the system wasn't really easy to use. Then critics said that was another way of politicians trying to avoid being transparent.
And absolutely, I think that we are a very open country now. I don't think that you'll find as much openness in many other European countries. We hold our civil servants to a much higher standard than other European officials. And these declarations can be very useful for other European countries to learn from. For instance, I filled out my declaration electronically before coming to France. This is very important work. You have to provide all sorts of information and really show everything that you own. But at the same time, it's very positive because it improves the overall situation. It provides a real insight into what's happening. And that was my message. We will hold to this. We all have to do it.
Corruption seems to be really high on the list of priorities. Now, the EU had linked this assets declaration to the next step in having visa liberalisation for Ukrainians. I believe you think that's going to happen very, very soon.
Yes, this was a pretext. But even if the declarations hadn't been a pretext, they would still have been very important for Ukraine. And in addition, it was just that additional push because there was pretty strong resistance against setting up these declarations. But now, Ukraine has upheld all of the requirements and fulfilled all of them for liberalizing the visa scheme. So now the ball is in the court of the European Union.
And I believe you're still looking at that EU membership, hoping that that will happen within the next decade, if I've understood you correctly. However, we have seen recently one EU country, the Netherlands, holding a referendum on this association agreement with the Ukraine, which had been signed off on by the other member states. Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, unable to sign up to it. How do you think that leaves EU-Ukraine relations?
That's the last step, the ratification, in order to be able to ratify the agreement with the European Union. So that's something that needs to be resolved alongside the European Union and the Netherlands. We are confident that we are going to end up with it. We, of course, respect the decision of the Dutch, but Ukraine is also entitled to its own sovereign decision, and that decision was taken. We signed the association agreement with the European Union. If you look back at the events that unfolded in 2013 and 2014, the revolution of dignity came about specifically because authorities at the time refused to carry out this process for greater European integration. And that was a very important turning point because Ukrainians want to be part of Europe. They want to have their rights upheld and protected, and it's crucial for this mechanism to work. And we will applaud this mechanism's implementation because, in our view, it is crucial.
Indeed, a lot of changes then in Ukraine over the past year or two since that revolution began. Well, All Reporter went to take a look at the changes in one specific region a year after the arrival of a man brought in to bring reform. The governor of Ukraine's main port city is the former president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili. He was praised for his corruption cutting there, but also accused of authoritarianism. 12 months after taking over in Odessa, a lot of his plans remain just that. Let's take a quick look.
This new administrative centre is one of Mikhail Saakashvili's flagship projects, a place to get a passport or register a business swiftly without paying a bribe. It's unique in Ukraine. Trouble is, it's only working at 10% of capacity.
The main problem is the finance, indeed. We're not getting financed, and they found every possible little legal reason not to provide us with the finance we need.
By they, he means Saakashvili's opponents on the regional council. Some, though, are growing sick of seeing the governor complain about persecution by his opponents.
Those who want to get things done look for ways to do so. Those who don't, they look for excuses. To have that much authority, that image, that much international clout, and to do so little, to me it's unforgivable.
There's widespread disappointment in Odessa that Saakashvili hasn't achieved more. But at the city's port, notorious for corruption, dispatchers say they have seen major improvements.
The new customs team has reorganized the process so that people cannot give or take bribes. Before, without a bribe, you could not get through at all. It was like a ticket for passage.
Ukraine allows companies to pay their import duties and VAT in any region they choose, regardless of where the goods entered the country. This system is costing the country billions, according to Yulia Marushevska, the young activist Saakashvili picked to clean up Odessa customs.
There are a group of companies who don't want to pay taxes, and now these companies, yes, they left Odessa customs. They went to other customs where they can bargain, they can pay bribe to custom officers who will say that your goods cost like $2 instead of 10, and then they will pay tax from this $2.
Yet many Ukrainians depend on being able to shop in the cheap markets where such semi-contraband goods are sold. The importers who supply them would not survive without cheating the system. This former haulier turned anti-corruption campaigner says he doesn't blame them.
Keeping costs down is a businessman's duty to the state and society. Okay, not to the state, but to society and to God. But what's he supposed to do when taxes are so absurdly high? He has to reduce his tax bill, especially if politicians are stealing those taxes to buy flashy cars with.
Saakashvili appeared cheerful as he attended a local school's end-of-year party. But the governor feels his fight cannot be won at the local level, or even in one country alone. He now says he may return to Georgian politics whilst still staying on in Ukraine.
We have in Georgia an oligarch, and I'm fighting in Ukraine against the oligarchs. Their behavior is very similar. And how to get rid of it? Well, we need to capitalize on the fact that every person normally wants a better future for at least their kids and for themselves. And status quo, stagnation, is not an option.
It certainly isn't, if Mikhail Saakashvili wants the people of Odessa to remember him as a true reformer and not just a big talker.
What we saw there, Mr. Prime Minister, in that report, one businessman at least saying that taxes are so high in Ukraine that in order to be successful in business there, you kind of have to cheat a little bit.
Well, if you look at the state of taxes in the country, I don't think it's fair to say that rates are especially high. For instance, if you compare them to taxes in France, people have to pay income tax of 18%. That's lower than in France. growth can happen when people can live regular lives. And that's why it's important to provide them with that. I don't think we can improve things without investment.
Economically, Ukraine then, has a lot of plans, a lot of potential, but still struggling. And when you look from the outside, you're looking to get more investors going into Ukraine, but a country still in some serious conflict and still struggling to fight corruption. Why would people invest there?
Я вже сказав, що
As I've said before,
найперший стимул – це те, що може забезпечити достатньо серйозні доходи.
the best and main driver is revenues, and that is what is going to draw people. We have huge opportunities for investors,
Достатньо серйозні доходи порівняно з тими, які
and that can
сьогодні
draw
Україна.
foreign investors. They may find better deals than they do elsewhere. We've even set up special instruments, for instance, a specialized bureau
Ми продовжуємо
that aims to attract and assist investors. We work on privatization, so that creates opportunities for investment in different fields.
Наше завдання створити
Our aim is to create a normal business climate welcoming opportunities, and there are huge opportunities.
Historically and even geographically, a lot of trade was done between the Ukraine and Russia. I believe recently Ukraine became 100% energy independent from Russia. Is that a sustainable thing?
Чи можемо, чи світу, чи можемо ми
Can we
працювати з країною
work
агресором?
with an aggressor if Russia
І все інше для того, щоб
decides to use its military ambition in order to fight against others, in order to overturn democratic values, then you can't work with that. And as you said, and it was very accurate, Ukraine used to be very dependent on Russia because Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And the whole economy was geared towards working together within the Soviet economy. And since independence, we had to provide for our transition. At the time, the Baltic states, Poland, and the Czech Republic carried out reforms. Ukraine missed the boat on that. And that is why we face the challenges that we do, political ones, problems linked to corruption. In 2015, we had the Orange Revolution, where Ukrainians gained this opportunity for a life in dignity. But unfortunately, politicians at the time didn't capitalize on it.
не почали служити своїй державі. Зараз
But today,
зовсім інший час, тому що ми
we're facing a brand new situation.
абсолютно енергетично незалежні від
Now, we are
Ми добуваємо
fully independent of Russia.
Ми імпортуємо газ.
We have our own gas resources. We also have gas coming in from France and other European countries. And we have worked with them in the field of energy.
Росія завжди тримала Україну
The traditional markets
сировинний додаток до своєї економіки.
are no longer there. Russia always saw and tried to see Ukraine as a stockpile of raw materials. But following this Russian aggression and economic aggression, we've had to shift our economic focus, and we've done so. We face quite a few challenges, but at the same time, we are doing our utmost to become economically independent.
So it can be a good thing only for the future. But you say independent of Russia, and yet I wonder, Kiev, has it now, if you like, given up on the region of Crimea? Have you accepted that that's gone?
Крим – це Україна, який
Crimea is
тимчасово
Ukraine.
анексований Росією.
It's a part of Ukraine that has been temporarily annexed by Russia, but Crimea will be Ukrainian again. No one can say when, and it will surely take time.
Теж не повинно бути. Я завжди
But
проводжу один і той
the vision of Ukraine hasn't changed within Ukraine, and I think the entire world needs to
анексії,
keep seeing it as such as well. Crimea, before it was annexed, was a beautiful, pleasant region with the sea, with mountains. After annexation,
Росією стала надто
Ukrainian Crimea, that was annexed by Russians, was turned into a military base, into the most powerful military base in the region. And let me ask,
Союзу і демократичному.
is this not a threat to European countries, to the democratic world, and to NATO?
Сам собі задасть це питання.
I think
І хай сам
everyone looking at Ukraine needs
І тоді все
to
зрозуміє.
consider that.
Поза увагою залишати
And I think we will
неможливо.
quickly come to the conclusion that you cannot ignore Crimea because it is a military base that is a threat to everyone.
Very finally, then, there's still also other parts of eastern Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk, still with their problems. We saw recent talks on this Minsk 2 deal. How secure do you think that deal is? And what do you expect the EU to do? Do you expect more sanctions, them to continue their sanctions on Russia? How do you see the future for eastern Ukraine?
Що стосується санкцій. Санкції були введені
Well, the Russian Federation and sanctions, let's talk about that.
карання за агресію.
As you know, sanctions were initially introduced to punish Russian aggression.
Коли ця агресія буде
And of course, they can be reviewed
відмовиться від
once the aggression ends, once there's no more aggression, and once Russia
порушення всіх можливих міжнародних норм.
stops its aggression. But sanctions are a type of punishment for these actions. So the end of these sanctions
Вважати демократичні
may be appropriate once the territory is freed, once the enemy has left the territory. But otherwise, you can't put a stop to them. That makes no sense. We're talking about an infringement of international law.
Отримати заохочення на те, щоб взамін за санкції продавати свободу, демократію і цінності, на яких базується
But the thing is,
цивілізований світ.
you simply cannot put a price tag on values.
Okay, well, there we have it, the Ukrainian position. It sounds like this road to peace has another distance to go. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on France 24. Thanks also, of course, to you at home for having joined us. That brings us to the end of this edition of Talking Europe.